The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts Allison Furno and Debi Vandenboom.
Today's topic is faith over fear, and I'm so excited to have with me Harrison and Lauren Russell. Harrison's a worship pastor here at the Phoenix campus, and Lauren works in the communications department for Dream City Church. And I'm just so glad to have you here today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
So I'm very excited about this particular episode. I've been wanting to do this. I think you were still pregnant, and I was telling you I wanted to have you come tell your story. I just feel very invested. I mean, I know a lot of us do, but in this whole amazing story that we're going to tell today, that is just such a beautiful picture of what happens when we place our faith in God and let Him direct our steps and guide our lives.
Yeah.
But I want to start a little bit about your background. So you guys have known each other for a long time, since you were wee little tots, right?
Yeah. So we are actually middle school and high school sweethearts. We were, how old were we?
I was 12 and you were 14.
13 when we met. I was 13, he was 12.
Gotta
But
make
when we
that-
started dating, I was 14, he was
Yeah.
12. I'm a little bit older. But yeah, so we met at church growing up together. Our parents were on staff at our church. And so we saw each other quite frequently and just grew up together and started dating. And yeah, we've been together 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years, I
think so.
And married for
Married for 5.5.
five and a
yeah.
half. And I love that because I think that's so rare, especially today, for people to, most of the time when kids date in junior high school, it does not last
Yeah.
for a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And so that's
It
such
is
a
rare.
It's a great thing. It's a great story to have. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys are from out of state too,
We're from
right?
Arkansas. Or I moved a lot growing up, but we met in Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where our relationship started and began. And
It was always so fun because his parents are from Arkansas. They were born and raised there and moved off when they got married and had kids. And when I was growing up in the church, I met all of his family, his grandparents, his aunt and uncles. So they all knew me from the time I was 7. So whenever I came into the family, it was just kind of like, oh, we already know her. This is already
it was
family.
little Lauren that was just coming in.
Yeah. So all of our family is still, back that direction. But we moved out here and we love it out here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. That's an amazing story. And so let's start with, because I just, this touches on so many things that are so relevant today, and just things that we're seeing in just so many people's stories, I think overlap with what the story that we're going to talk about today, because it starts with your health journey. You were having some issues, and just, so if you could just tell whatever you want to tell about that.
Yeah. So my health issues go back to when I was a teenager, and when I was in my later teens, just having a lot of issues in like my feminine health as far as my cycles and things like that. And I went to doctors, and it was kind of like the Band-Aid that they put on it of birth control, and didn't really look into my symptoms, didn't, go to the root of what was happening. And I was 18, so I didn't really know any better. I was like, okay, I'll trust if my doctor's telling me to go on it, I'll go on it. But the issue is it stayed that way, and no doctor ever questioned it even further from that. And so I ended up being on birth control for about 8 years, through college, through getting married. And it wasn't until we were married and started to experience some other symptoms outside of what I had previously experienced that it was like, there may be more to this that isn't just all related to my cycles. It may be other things that are going on in my body. And right after we got married, I had a pretty bad flare-up of some issues with feeling very fatigued, very sore all over my body, just like overall feeling really bad. And I didn't know what it was about. And so I went to a doctor, and when I got there, they did a standard, panel of tests and said everything came back normal. And they just started asking all these questions like, well, your family doesn't live here. Are you okay with that? Do you miss your family? Or are you struggling with this? Just really like pointed questions, like they were trying to get to something. And I kept answering. She said, well, I really think you might be depressed and you need to go on antidepressants. And I was like, I don't think so. I just got married like 2 months ago. I feel like I'm in a good place in my life. And so that was the start of, okay, something's wrong, and the medical field isn't always going to be able to like really press in unless you like really press in yourself.
Yeah.
But I was so discouraged by that experience that I stopped looking into anything for a long time, and just decided, I can't really find a doctor that's going to help me. So I'll just kind of manage what I can on my own. But that was not possible for a long time. And it was when we were talking and deciding about starting a family and trying to figure out, if I've had all these issues for all this time, should I go ahead and go off birth control and figure out if those symptoms come back, that sort of thing. And so it kind of started there is really when the health journey truly started. I had experienced all these issues for a long time, but never really dove into them and figured out what is it that's going on. And so that was May of 2022 that I went off birth control, and everything started to come back. Everything I had experienced in my teens just hit even worse. Yeah. And fatigue. I barely, I would be falling asleep on the way home from work. I just couldn't keep my eyes open, and just in pain all the time, headaches, just really couldn't function normally, calling out sick for work all the time just because I couldn't get out of bed. It was just that all the time. And finally, it was really a God thing. I was still so discouraged by my previous experiences with doctors that I didn't really have a lot of faith that one was going to help me. But I was like, something has to change. And if we're going to have a chance of having a family, I need to walk this road and at least try again. So I was at home Googling doctors, and there was one right on the other side of our neighborhood. So I was like,
right across the fence.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was a family doctor. It wasn't like a big, sometimes those big, corporations almost of hospitals and things that can be a little less focused on your health and more just the Band-Aid. But I was like, maybe someone who's a family doctor, it's a personal practice, him and his wife, maybe they'll just
take more time
with you. And so I went to him, and he was the first one. He was in the room with me for an hour, the first visit, and listened to every symptom, and he would ask questions. What about this symptom? Yeah, I do have that. And so at the end of it, he was like, I 100% believe that you have a thyroid issue. And he said, 80% sure you also have an autoimmune disorder. I was like, okay. And so he did all the blood work, and it's exactly what came back. And once we finally had a name of what was going on, it felt like hope of, okay, now I can address what is going on. I know where to start. In the past, right. I didn't know where to start, but now I knew where to go. And so it led me on a journey with my diet. And again, this was May 2019 or 2022. And then October 2022 is when I was diagnosed. So I had several months of trying to figure that out. And, we were wanting to start a family and had not been told that I couldn't get pregnant, but that it would present challenges to getting pregnant. And so we just kept on that journey of our health and our food, diet sort of things, and went through all that, which
and you
was
guys both got healthy too, right?
Yeah. We knew that, starting a family was not just going to be about my health, but also his health. And so we really both walked that journey. I don't know if you have anything to say about that time.
Yeah, it was so Lauren. What she actually did, it was literally another God thing. It was a friend of ours. We were over at their house on a random night, and she was kind of telling her about these symptoms. And at this point, you had found the doctor, you had known kind of what the diagnosis was and all that. And her mom actually had a lot of similar things going on.
Our friend's mom.
And our friend that we were over at their house, her mom, had some very similar things. And she was like, I know this is crazy. And this is also a few years ago. This has kind of become popular now, but it wasn't back then. But she's like, this is going to sound crazy, but my mom had a similar thing. And she went on a carnivore diet that was strictly meat, clean, unprocessed, nothing else for an extended period of time. And she's like, I know that sounds crazy, but it worked. It healed her gut. It took care of so many different things. And so it wasn't a right away. It was like a while later.
Yeah, I was kind of like, okay, that's a little crazy. I don't know if I'm that extreme. Like, we'll see. But I had a really bad flare up at the end of the year. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to, like the next day after my flare up.
She decided, when Lauren decides to do something too, it's happening. She's doing it.
Like, I just jumped in and I ended up doing it for 2 months. And it helped so much. Like, it was really, inflammation was the biggest factor for me, and healing that inflammation in my whole body, my gut primarily, but the whole thing. And so did that for 2 months. And then afterwards just focused on introducing healthy foods back into my diet, still staying away from all the processed junk and just trying to keep things good and healthy. But through a few months of doing that, my thyroid doctor, he kept doing blood work, and he said, you're in a really good place now to get pregnant. Like, you guys just keep trying and it should be a matter of time. And so that was kind of 2 years of walking that health journey, even before we knew if we'd be able to have it.
Which I think it's so many people that are put on birth control pills just as a Band-Aid, right? For everything.
Yeah.
Acne, whatever, just like a million different little things. And their Band-Aid is to give you hormonal birth control pills, which cause a lot of damage. I mean, there's more coming out on that now.
Yeah, thankfully.
Thankfully, right? Because for years it was like, okay, the pet turtle you weren't allowed to step on, right? No one was allowed to talk about that, and how bad really those synthetic hormones are for our bodies, and they just how much damage they wreak havoc on our system. But so many girls are just handed these pills like this is going to fix everything, but like you were saying, nothing was fixed.
It just masked issues. It kept them at bay where it didn't bother me as bad, but they were still there. Right. And then whenever I came off of it, it was like, oh, here we are again. Let's bring all of this back, which it was a Holy Spirit prompting, because we knew we wanted to start a family. And I was like, I feel like I should go off birth control even before we're ready, because what if these symptoms come back? What if we need to address some things first before we're even able to have kids? And that was really a Holy Spirit thing, because I just felt it in my spirit to just move on that.
And it's important that we are advocating for, because again, you have to go see doctors that don't know anything. And, I'm not going to go into that now, but we had a similar thing walking through with Eden, my daughter, told there was nothing wrong with her. I'm like, there is clearly something happening. Like there is nothing wrong. Yeah. And you have to fight a little bit to try to get to the bottom of some answers sometimes. Yeah. And it's not antidepressants. It's not like they just want to mask things, and rather than find, and send you on your way to kind of. And
it really, like, the way that the Lord worked in our whole story, I mean, it's our whole life He's worked in it, but I'd been told it's not your thyroid by multiple doctors. This doctor that I just happened to Google, who's on the other side of our neighborhood, the other side of the fence, he specializes in thyroid related disorders. So the fact that I found the person that was just what I needed, that was only the Lord.
Right. Yeah. So good. So then let's move on to the pregnancy. So you did, you got pregnant.
I did.
Tell us how that.
Yeah. So like I said, it was September 2023 that my doctor was like, you're in a great place to get pregnant.
I remember the night that it happened, it's got a big day for us. We had other things going on, and she happened to get the email with her results like in the middle of it, and that happened several times before, and it had been like it didn't look in the moment like such great news, and so it was this like do we open it now? Like, this is supposed to be a big day for us. Do we want to like have bad news looming overhead in the middle of it? But you just decided to open it, and all of her numbers that were so like severely out of range before were all like perfectly in every single number, every one that was associated to her diagnosis, every single one. And that was the moment that we were like, this could happen for us, this is proof that like the changes and the Lord and what he's doing in our lives, like this, we're headed in the direction that we really feel like the Lord's laid on our heart, that we've been praying for and believing for.
Yeah. So that was September. 2 months later, or 3 months later, December, beginning of December is when we found out we were pregnant. And so it was a long journey, but from the time of healthiness to being able to get pregnant, it was fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And so we found out we were pregnant. It was so exciting in the middle of the holiday season, which is crazy busy for us.
Especially here.
Yeah. Yes. The show.
There's normal Christmas crazy and then there's Dream City, right? It's a whole different energy level.
And we found out we were pregnant the first day of the Christmas show.
Man,
and so we're so excited. And then we come and, have to work and we're like, nobody knows.
Get to work. Just kidding.
Yeah, we get to work. But we go to the shows and we're like, nobody knows. It's our little secret. But also I was starting to feel symptoms for the first time. I'm like, oh, I got to hide this in the middle of all the things going on. But we knew we wanted to tell our family before, making it a huge thing. And our family is all out of state. And so when we went back for Christmas, we were like, it's still early, but we don't get to see our family a ton, so let's tell them. So we got to tell all of our family, and it's super exciting. It's his parents' first grandchild that we were telling them about, and his grandmother's first great grandbaby, and so it was just like exciting all around for being able to tell them. And when we found out we were pregnant, I had gone back to my thyroid doctor and said, a lot of times when you get pregnant, your thyroid is very important for all things pregnancy. And so you have to adjust some things. So he ran some numbers and he noticed one of my numbers for pregnancy related, the HCG levels that they test when you're pregnant, that they were a little elevated. And so I didn't actually tell Harrison what elevated HCG levels could potentially mean.
Yeah, I was just like, wow, impressive. Yeah. Way to go.
Extra credit.
Yeah.
But I go home and back to Arkansas, we're telling our families, and I told my mom about it, and I'm like, elevated HCG levels can sometimes be an indicator of multiples in pregnancies. And like it could happen. It could also just be, one healthy baby. And I still, again, had not told Harrison what this could mean. But when we told the rest of our family, my mom was like, oh, tell them about your HCG levels. And I tell them, and my sister-in-law immediately said, oh, you're having twins. And that was the first time Harrison was understanding what all of that meant.
It's like, what? What do you mean?
And so we told all of our family. It was like this, joke, like, what if it was twins? And we hadn't had our first ultrasound yet because I think I was only like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that. And so we come back home after Christmas and go to our first ultrasound in January. And we, in fact, were pregnant with twins, twin girls. And so that was a shock. Even though we knew it was a possibility, it was still like we had kind of talked ourselves out of it. Like, it's just one baby. Yeah. But that ultrasound appointment, we will never
And so how
forget.
far along were you?
I think it was 8 weeks, like a little over 8 weeks.
Right. And so just because like the life issue is such a big deal for me, but it's like 8 weeks, you can tell like that they're girls, you can tell that they're twins, like they're developed enough to be able to see all of that detail of life, right? I mean, I think that's an important part of this
They were able to see both of their heartbeats.
And this is 8 weeks, right? So this is still so early.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, this is abortion pill early, right? Like people are still able to do that in there. I mean, it's just so important, I think, to talk about how much they can tell already about those babies at such an early stage, because it's just the way God created life is so amazing and beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, we could see them moving around. They could see both of their heartbeats. I mean, like I saw that and saw two babies. There were two babies inside of me.
Very clearly two babies.
Even though they were a little bit bigger than a blueberry, they were
Right.
still very obviously babies. in
Yeah,
there.
teeny tiny, but just so intricately designed by God. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead and continue your story there with then when did you first know that there was something
Yeah.
awry?
So I don't think anything was really ever said at that appointment. Really, it was just like, well, depending on what type of twins you have, you might be referred to another office. We can only handle certain twins at the regular OB, is what our OB was telling us. But she said if you have a specific type of twins, you might be referred to a high risk.
Right.
So that was kind of the first time we heard of it. But
And honestly, didn't even think anything of it. It was just like, oh, okay, they're naturally high risk. In my head, I'm like, there's two of them. There's a lot of things that
Right.
could happen, like freak things that could come up that are not common. Like maybe there's just a very generic reason that because they're certain types of twins, everyone goes to see high risk doctors.
yeah, so we weren't, it was all new to us. We really didn't know what that meant. And so I didn't have another appointment. Was it our 12-week scan? We opted in for the scan on genetics and all the other things that they look for. And that's when we found out that they were identical twins. And it was when we found out that they shared one placenta. And so they call them monodi twins. They have their own little membranes. They're in the same sac, but their own membranes. And then they shared a placenta. And so our ultrasound tech was kind of telling us,
Which is rare, right?
yeah. I don't remember
It's
the statistic.
rare, but like at the same time, not super rare. Like, you know, most of the people you see walking down the street don't have or are monodi twins. But when it comes to twins,
Well, just identical twins are
Yes.
more
Yeah.
rare than fraternal twins.
Yeah.
And
Because fraternal twins are hereditary, identical twins are not hereditary. And so it's
Yeah.
not as frequent. And for monodi twins, I think it was only like 30% of monodi twins ever have any issues with the pregnancy. So
Right.
it was like, not super common. But at that 12-week scan, they started to see that one of the twins, the lower one, they called them baby A and baby B. Baby A was measuring smaller than baby B. But besides that, everything still theoretically, what they could see at that point looked fine. It wasn't any major issues at that point besides just a slight smaller size difference, which is common in twins regardless of any issues. One can be smaller than the other. And so she told us, well, the specific type of twins you have, monodi twins, you are going to be referred to a high-risk doctor. So, okay. Well, we didn't see our OB again we weren't scheduled to see her for another month. And so we were just like, okay, well, I guess we'll wait to find out about being referred. But again, we didn't know, what does it mean? Why are we being referred? What issues could come up? It was just that's always this big question mark of why are we being referred? Yes, they share a placenta, but why is that concerning? We don't really know what that means. And then at 14 weeks, I found out that, and I think in this time frame, we knew they were identical. We had found out they were girls at some point through blood test. And so we had celebrated those big things. We kept learning. It was a new thing every couple of weeks. Oh, they're girls. Oh, they're identical.
it was all the phone calls home, guess what? New information.
But then around 14 weeks, I was 14 weeks, we moved because we were having twins. We were we need a bigger space for two girls. And I overexerted myself a little bit too much. I don't like to slow down. I like to just keep going. And pregnancy really challenged that for me. But I had overexerted myself a little bit on that move and I had some bleeding. And so we went in just to make sure everything was okay. And at that appointment, the ultrasound tech, she didn't say anything to us. But when we went back to the nurse practitioner, we didn't see my OB. We saw a nurse practitioner. She said there's a little bit of amniotic fluid issue, that one of the babies has low amniotic fluid that's looking a little concerning, but you guys are going to be referred. They just kept saying, you guys are going to be referred to a high-risk doctor. I was like, who's referring us? Who's actually going to refer us?
What does that look like?
Yes. And I remember she left to go do something and, no one's really telling us what it means. So I just do the worst thing you can do and go to Google. What does low amniotic fluid mean? And I immediately, the fear that set in from what I had found, I just started crying in the office and trying to hold it back and trying not to whatever. But the nurse practitioner comes back in and she starts talking, and I just am like losing it. And she's like, she talks to you, right?
It was when we were leaving. So she said that about the low fluid. We asked if there were, I think because that had stuck in our heads, the sonographer before saying that one of them was smaller, and that could be concerning, but maybe not. So we were like, do you notice a size difference? And, well, nothing that we noticed, but the fluid is definitely there. And so as we're leaving, Lauren's walking ahead of me, and the nurse practitioner comes beside me and looks at me, and she just goes, does she hate me? I was like, I don't think so. I think it's a very emotional time.
Yeah, I'm just like, all of these people, as much as like we were thankful to be learning this information, no one's telling us what this means. And so it's just all of these scary things that something could be wrong with our babies, but no one's explaining any of it. And so finally at that appointment, we tell her, you keep saying we're being referred, but no one's actually referred us. We're 14 weeks, and they said usually you're referred between 15 and 18 weeks. I'm like, well, I'm not seeing my OB until I'm like 18 or 19 weeks. So if I need to be referred, I'd like to go ahead and get that going. So she referred us that day, and they called us, got it all set up, and we went in. And that was finally the first time our high risk doctor was like, okay, here's what this could mean and what we're seeing. Because they shared a placenta, there is a potential issue with blood supply, because your blood supply is what's keeping them alive through that placenta, and they're having to share it. So usually a baby would have their own placenta that they're getting their own supply. And with twins, usually they have their own placentas so that they are getting their own blood supply. But because they have to share, sometimes there can be an unequal sharing that happens. And there's a couple different scenarios of what could happen, but they really weren't sure if we had either of them or if we didn't have any issues, but because they were seeing a little size difference and the amniotic fluid difference, they just wanted to monitor us and make sure it never turned into anything that was an issue. They said sometimes it resolves itself, and I think that 70% of people, it just resolves itself and it's fine. But then there's that 30% that it becomes something bigger.
He did also. So the first day that we met with him, as he's explaining what these things are, he's telling us there's something called twin-to-twin transfusion, which is basically one twin is taking excess. They're taking too much. It creates a very unbalanced where one twin is getting way too much, one twin's not getting enough. That's going to hurt them both. For that one, he told us then that there's a fetal care center in Colorado. No one in the state of Arizona specializes in it. Like, no one can actually perform it here. But there's a surgery that you can get done that will basically course correct the blood and send it to the correct places. And it's not 100% proven, but the statistics are much better than if you don't get it addressed. There was another one, and then there was something called selective growth restriction. And the way that he explained it was it's basically like there is the one twin is being restricted in the way that it cannot grow past a certain point. And the way he explained it was kind of like, there's no solution for that. Like, and so in my head, at least, I walked out of there thinking, Lord, I hope this is twin-to-twin transfusion, if it's anything, and not selective growth, because that's like doomsday scenario. There's no coming back from that. He kind of said at that point, you have to put your faith and put all of your energy and investment in the twin that you think can make it. It was kind of the way that he explained it at that point. So it was like the last words that we wanted to hear were selective growth restriction. Like we just kept praying, Lord, let it not be that, let it not be that. If it's anything, let it be this twin to twin.
Yeah.
Because at least there's a solution that's been proven over time.
Yeah.
And then did he suggest the reduction at that point or no?
No, he didn't. It was basically like, we're just going to manage it. We're going to watch it. And he told us what it could be, but he said, I don't want to get to, I asked him, I said, what are the solutions if they are at either one of these? And he said, I don't want to get to that point. Yeah. If we get to that point, we'll talk solutions. But he said, I just want to address what could be going on, but it could also not be that. And it could resolve itself and be fine. So that was appreciated, that it was like, we're going to take this a step at a time. Yeah. But he explained what all could be there. And so that we were thankful for that. But we started going in weekly at that point.
It was bi-weekly at that point.
Bi-weekly, so every other week. Mm-hmm. We would go in, they would measure their amniotic fluid, their blood flow, look at their sizes, and it was at our appointment. or 20 weeks, just right over 20 weeks that we went in.
Full like anatomy.
Yeah, they did the anatomy scan. Everything seemingly looked fine, besides one thing. But we go in after, so they would do the ultrasounds, and then we would go into his office. It's like those TV shows where you go into a doctor's office and you're sitting in the chairs across from his desk, like this big, looming appointment. That's what it felt like every time we went.
I'm in a movie. This is crazy.
But we go in and he said, we're seeing more issues that like it's gotten worse than when you first came. Their amniotic fluid is supposed to be more level. It's supposed to be somewhere between 2 centimeters and 8 centimeters. And if either one of them got too close to 8 or 2, that was considered dangerous. They needed to be more in that like 5 to 6 range. And at that point, baby A, Willow, was 2 point something centimeters, and then Oakley was at like 7 point something. So
they were both,
they were getting further apart. Willow was still measuring a lot smaller, about I think like 2 weeks behind Oakley. And then what was the other thing? Their blood flow. They were seeing some blood flow issues in Willow in her umbilical cord that were abnormal, that she wasn't getting the correct type of blood flow that she should be getting.
He also was like, and today's scan showed some concerning things with Willow's brain. It looks like there's a portion of her brain that just hasn't developed. Like it's just not there. It's missing. And if that is true, then here's what this means. I don't even remember what the things were, but it was a list of.
It was kind of the least of our worries. That's probably why we were like remember the least about it, because he was like, on one scan it's showing that it's missing, and one scan it's there. So we don't really know which one's correct. I'm like, well, if it's showing that it's there on one scan, then we're probably fine. Like it's probably fine.
Right.
But that was the first time they told us all that and said, you're going to have to go to Colorado to the fetal care center.
And you need to go now. Like they were like, we want you there by Sunday. This is a Friday. We want you there by Sunday. And planned to be there for a week and a half when you get out there.
Wow.
And that was the first time that he suggested the selective reduction of Willow, baby A, that either way, selective growth or twin to twin, we were probably better off to decide to terminate Willow to give Oakley better chances of surviving, because Willow probably wasn't going to make it through the pregnancy. And that was when it like hit us. Like we knew all of these things were concerning, but that was probably the lowest like moment emotionally, because we went home, we're having to figure out flights, figure out getting to Colorado, waiting for this call from the fetal care center from Colorado, and just sitting in this, that it's not an option for us. Like we knew it wasn't an option to terminate either baby. But what does that mean for us? Like if, we're not going to do this, but now there's these chances that she's not going to survive. And are we going to end up at the end of this pregnancy with only one baby? And you just start going through all of these questions of really of your faith. Like, am I going to trust that, God got us to this point?
Right.
Like we are only pregnant because of him. Are we going to trust that he's going to see us through the rest of the pregnancy?
And it wasn't like we were, or at least speaking for myself, it wasn't like we were doubting God's sovereignty or like the fact, his ability to be able to step in. It was more so like knowing even if he doesn't scenario, like what if it's his will that we've come this far to not meet both of them here on this earth. Like it was wrestling with, what is that going to do to my faith? And do I have enough trust and love in the Lord to know that his plan and his will is sufficient through anything? So it was like these very deep things that we were considering in the midst of all that.
Yeah. And things that like I never wanted to even like talk, like I couldn't even say it out loud. We called our parents to let them know we're having to go to Colorado. And I just cried through the whole call with my parents, and I could barely even bring myself to talk about the fact that they were suggesting termination. I was like, I don't even want to think about it because it's not an option for me. Yeah. So that was Friday. We got our flights, got everything to be able to fly out Sunday night. We finally got the call. They set up the appointments for Tuesday. So we had Monday to kind of get there, get settled. And really it's another point of just seeing God in it. But we started on that Sunday when we were flying out, we both really just felt we'd been mostly private about it. You know, I think you knew, some people knew about what was going on, but we really hadn't shared a lot with people the challenges we were seeing in the pregnancy. But at this point, we really felt like we were supposed to publicly share it because we knew that either way, whatever happened, God was going to get the glory from it. So we were sitting in the airport Sunday night and made the post and shared it publicly. And the things that came from that were things that we did not expect, or like we didn't plan, you know, any of it. But people just started reaching out to our parents, to us. And this trip that was unexpected, you know, we're married 5.5 years, but like we weren't ready to just make a spur of the moment trip to Colorado. The expenses that come with that and, you know, insurance, things like that weren't going to help. So we're going to have this huge expense in the middle of an expensive pregnancy because it's high risk. And people just started reaching out. We would be like doing something and we'd get a notification, so-and-so has sent you money in Cash App, so-and-so has Venmo'd you. And we ended up not paying a single dime for that entire trip. Our flights, our rental car, our hotel. Someone called and booked our hotel for us for the whole time we were there. The food we ate, like it was just another point that as it just kept happening, we were like, okay, God's in this. That as scary as this is, and we don't know what it's going to hold, like the Lord is in this. And we can trust in that fact and have peace in that fact that he's in this no matter what's going on, what's going to happen. But we went in on Tuesday and it was a long day of appointments. I had ultrasound, an MRI to check on Willow's brain, and then a fetal echo, which was another ultrasound. And that team there was amazing. All the fear that we had about things, they just like helped to kind of just make it light, even though it was scary. Like they were laughing with us and we were just trying to be ourselves and we really wanted to be lights to the people that work there. We were like, they probably see a lot of people that are just so filled with fear that I feel like it would be refreshing. Like if we just went in there like so joy filled because the Lord's going to be with us through it, that like we could be a testimony to them that like, wow, these people are walking through the darkest thing that they've probably walked through and they are able to have joy, and just to be able to be a light to people there in that. And so, yeah, go ahead.
We also, just a random fact, they had like a break room, like I don't know, maybe a lot of hospitals do, but where you could go, people who were there for the fetal care center, it was like snacks and waters and things. And they had this bulletin board on the wall and it was just filled with pictures of babies that had been born after the patients had come through there. And it was just like seeing the successes of the place. Right. And knowing that like one day our baby's picture are going to be up on this wall, and how that even put hope into me, at least a little bit. Like, man, the small glimpses of things that you get in a season or a story like that, that's like, we're going to make it through this, you know?
Yeah. And so we went through the first ultrasound and our ultrasound tech wasn't telling us like everything, but she was like, I mean, there's a size difference, but she's baby Ace, like she has a strong heartbeat. She was very active in that appointment. Like she was showing out, like they were struggling to get pictures because she just kept moving around. And again, we're at like 21 weeks now at this point. And she said she's like seeing the blood flow looks normal. And I think that was kind of the amniotic fluid was level. So
wow, yeah.
4 days ago it was 2 and 7, and
she was committed to she's like, I'm gonna find a good pocket of this fluid, and she did. She like spent a while.
They were at like 5 and 6 centimeters between the two of them. So it was like, okay, they're even. The blood flow looks good. She's still smaller, but like that's not a huge concern at this point. We go through the MRI. We don't get the results right away to that, and then we go through the echo. And they're like, their hearts are structurally perfect. Like they're not going to have any structural issues with their hearts. Like they're going to be like, we're giving you the check of approval that after they're born, their hearts are going to be structurally sound. And it was in that echo the first tech came in and did it, and then she left, and then someone came back in, and she said, I'm the fetal cardiologist. And our hearts kind of were like, uh-oh, like, why is the cardiologist coming in? Like, is there something wrong? But she said, nothing's wrong. I just want to do a double check, make sure that we can like verify everything's good to go. And after she did, it was in that room that she was like, so it kind of looks like you guys are probably dealing with selective growth restriction. I don't think they're seeing twin to twin. And again, because our high risk doctor here scared us, we were like, oh no, like it's not twin to twin. It's selective growth. Like what is, so now it's just like every time we felt like we were feeling good about things, the enemy just like gave us another jab to like put some fear in there. Like, oh gosh, like what does this mean? And then we had the longest wait of our life because we had to meet with the doctor after that. He was going to go through all the results and tell us, you know, what our options were. What
longest
we were
wait of our life.
at.
It was the same day, but
yes, it was. It was that same day, but we were just like, okay, here we go. And so again, that team there was amazing. The doctor came in. He started like drawing graphs and showing us all the different things that could be an issue in our pregnancy, but what they were seeing. So he would check off, we're not seeing this. We're not seeing this.
He explained to like, this is how you got here. So this is all of the kind of twins that are possible. This is how this happens. This is how this happens. And like these, you're monodi twins. And like, again, all of it. And so we left with like this whole understanding of not just our pregnancy, but like how ours is compared to other twin pregnancies. And it was cool.
Yeah. But he goes through and things that they were seeing 4 days prior, like their amniotic fluid differences and her blood flow issues in Willow, all of that had course corrected in 4 days. Just so happened that we had went public with it and people were praying about it. We're like, that's not a coincidence. And then the MRI, that was the funny thing. He like forgot about the MRI. And so we're just like sitting through the whole appointment and waiting for him to talk about the MRI. And he's like, so you have any questions? And we're like, the MRI? And he's like, oh, her brain's totally fine. We're like, okay, thanks for starting with that maybe. But he tells us it is selective growth restriction, and there's 3 stages basically of selective growth, 1, 2, and 3. And when we had got the appointment in Colorado, we were in stage 2, meaning her blood flow was abnormal. But
the scans that got us sent there were
right.
reading at stage 2.
But the scans that they did there in Colorado was showing she was only stage 1. So her blood flow was normal. She was just smaller. I think out of the whole pregnancy, they think it may have been like cord placement where her cord was attached to the placenta versus Oakley's cord. She was just getting more of the blood, Oakley was. So at this point, he tells us, you know, if it comes back to stage 2 or 3, that's where that selective reduction comes in to where you can terminate baby A and just put all of your hope and faith into the one baby that's more likely to make it. And he actually said, if that's not an option for you, so we didn't have to like jump in and say, no, that's not an option. But he said, if that's not an option, and we said, no, there is something else we can do. And that was the first time that throughout this whole journey, anyone had told us any other option was available besides termination. And so it was finally a moment like, okay, what is it? Because it's the only option that's something we are willing to do. He said, you have to be 24 weeks. And again, I'm 21 at this point. He said, you have to make it to 24 weeks. But if it continues getting worse, you would have to be hospitalized, and they would manage the pregnancy the entire time from the hospital.
Yeah. You'd stay there until
the baby's
delivery. Yeah.
And they, at any point that they felt it was necessary, they would deliver the babies. And so you don't really have any guarantee of how long you'd make it, but you'd at least they'd be viable outside the womb.
And he what's interesting was as he was walking through those 2 options, it was kind of like the reduction was one that it wasn't like, again, this pressure, but it was clear that was his recommendation from the meeting. He's like, the other one, that's going to be hard. Like, you're going to be monitored all the time. Like every few hours, they're going to come in and look, and it's going to be like the longest weeks or months or whatever of your lives, because you're just going to be spending it in a hospital. And so it was like the two options were, as we only had one option, but it was like, oh man, still that can be difficult. It can be a hard road to walk.
Yeah. And so he told us he wanted us to come back 2 days later just to make sure that everything still was looking good. But if it was, then we were good to go home. And so we came back, I think it was 3 days later on Friday. Mm-hmm. And in faith, we were like, we're going to make our flights for Friday afternoon and we'll come in and do this appointment and then we're going to fly out because we're not going to need to stay here any longer. And everything still looked good. They did see at that scan, a little like blip of abnormal blood flow in Willow. It was like normal, abnormal, normal. Like it just would randomly show up. And they were like, that could be for a multitude of reasons. We don't really know what it is, but you'll just need to be monitored weekly when you go back home. And again, this was actually a different doctor because the first one had to go out of town. And he said, I asked him, I was like, is there any other reason like we would have to come back at this point? Like, are we cleared from being here or would we have to come back later? And he was like, I mean, only if you guys decided to do selective reduction later in the pregnancy, then you would have to come back. Which in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm 21 weeks. Like we would decide later to do selective reduction. Like if we make it to 24 weeks, they're okay, but we could still come back.
Abortion's legal through all 9 months in Colorado.
Yeah.
And he was a little more pushy with it. Like he was like, I'll see you again. Like it very felt like that kind of.
But with him, I was like very firm, like that's not an option for us. So like if that's the only reason we'd come back, we're not coming back. So we flew home and we went back to our high-risk doctor, and he was honestly shocked at the turnaround of things. But he wasn't hopeful at that point. He was never truly hopeful till the end of the pregnancy. It was always like this, like, yeah, we'll see how things go type of personality. But they ended up watching us weekly, every Friday. And every time we went in, at this point, now that we had all the knowledge that we gained in Colorado, we knew what they were looking for, and we could see the scans and read the scans before we ever went back to talk to them. And
Can you do that again, please?
We're like,
I don't trust it.
This is showing abnormal. Can you just do it one more time? I know it's normal. And the whole rest of the pregnancy, her blood flow remained normal. The amniotic fluid remained level between the two of them. She still was smaller, but that was part of it. She was selective growth restriction, so she was going to remain smaller than her sister, but she was growing at the same rate. So it wasn't like she was not growing. But when was it that we went?
It was towards the end. One of our final appointments. We also had this sonographer that we loved. Like she became like our friend, and if all the whole thing, we like miss Heather. like we want to go hang out with her, but she was always like very, very thorough in finding everything, and she was very positive about the whole situation. And but this one day we went into a consultation after one of our appointments, and he was looking through everything, and he's like, I'm hopeful. I think baby A is going to make it. And we're like, whoa.
Glad you're in the party.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, we've been on that train for a while.
Yeah.
But it really was just like this whole journey of like, every medical professional for the most part was telling us there's big issues here. And a lot of them were saying it's better off to just, put your faith in the one that's doing well.
The one. And, And so,
So once we got to that point, it was like, okay, like we knew in our spirit things were going to be okay. In the flesh, we didn't always know. It was always this question of, what's going to happen. But truly after that appointment in Colorado, I think for me, even though I knew there was always a possibility, I just knew that she was going to be okay. Like however the journey looked the rest of the time, both of our babies were going to be fine.
They were born at how many weeks?
34 weeks.
34 weeks, which is amazing that they lasted that long inside the womb. And they're how old now?
They are 3.5 months old.
Mm-hmm. And they're both perfect and healthy.
They're amazing.
And the story just continued afterwards. They were in the NICU for Oakley was there for 17 days. Willow was there for 33 days. And
which is still not bad.
no, they were like, they did amazing. The only issue they had when they were born was that they didn't know how to eat. Like they didn't have any breathing issues. They didn't have any other issues besides needing to learn how to eat, because that happens at 35 weeks and they were 34. So they learned how to eat, came home, and have been doing amazing. Now all they do is eat. But when they were in the NICU,
catching up.
Yeah. All they were, when they were in the NICU, they found murmurs in their hearts, which structurally they were fine, but like certain holes didn't close when they were born, that sort of thing. Willow's ended up being fine. It wasn't anything to worry about, but Oakley had more of a concerning issue that they were looking at. And so we ended up being referred to a cardiologist, an infant cardiologist, after she left the NICU. And that first appointment was a month after she left. And there was a hole that was more concerning, that if it didn't close, they would probably have to do a procedure when she was around 4 or 5 years old. And then she was having an issue in her pulmonary valve, so the valve that takes the blood to the lungs. And he said, this is the more concerning thing, that we're really, like, if it continues, it had gotten worse since we left the NICU. And he said, if it continues down that path, then she'll have to have a procedure immediately. And
so this was Oakley, the bigger
baby. So all the pregnancy we were concerned about Willow, and now they were here and we're concerned about Oakley. And so it's like, okay, switch gears of, which baby's dealing with what. But I like knew, okay, she might have to have a procedure, but I was just like, the Lord has been in this journey since before we were pregnant, through the whole pregnancy. Yeah. Like, I just, at this point, had so much faith that it was going to be fine. Like, I'm not going to worry about this. Like, we've had to overcome so many fears and worries through the whole journey. Like, I'm not going to put my energy worrying about this at this point.
No. So I honestly forget.
Forget it. Yeah.
It was just like unconcerned, like, oh, that's okay, whatever they're seeing.
God's got that.
Yeah. And we went back after 2 months, after she had been out of the NICU for 2 months, and it is trending better now. So she has to keep going to just make sure it closes, but they're not concerned about it, not concerned about doing a procedure. So
that's so
they're
good.
Happy, healthy girls.
Yeah. And so just real quick before we end here, because what role did worship and prayer play in all of this? Because I know you guys are both worship leaders. Mm-hmm. Worship is a huge battle against fear, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I will say it was no coincidence that the year that we really were focused on our health and getting pregnant, it started off with 21 days of prayer here at the church in January. And that was when you came to us and were like, I don't normally ask this, but are you guys like trying to have a family? Because I really felt the Lord like put it on your heart. Yeah. And
I felt like I was supposed to pray for you to have a baby.
Yeah.
And like, I barely know you guys. You know my kids. I'm like, you're going to think I'm a weirdo, but I have to do it. I just kept walking around praying, and the Lord kept going, go tell him, go talk to him. I'm like, all right, fine. I'm going to go over say something.
And so
I'm the weirdo. It's fine. Won't be the first time.
So, I mean, it started off with prayer and worship, in that before we ever even got into what all of that, how that all played out, like prayer was a part of it.
Yeah. And we think a lot back to that Colorado trip, because that was kind of like the pivotal memory or moment that we had. But the whole time we had this worship album on in the car. And but specifically, we were on the plane. We've been singing a song in church the past couple weeks, months. It's called Every Good Thing by River Valley. And it's this up-tempo song. It's like this praise song. My phone, when we were on the plane, was on shuffle. And this was back right when we were wrestling with all those thoughts and like, what's going to happen? What if this is God's will? What if like this does not go the way that what if we leave Colorado in a much worse place than we came into it? And right when the captain started we're starting our final descent into Denver, this song, Every Good Thing, just came on shuffle. And there's a lyric in there that says, Jesus, receive all the glory, take all the honor for what you're about to do. And it was like, that just smacked me in the face. And it was kind of like my countenance changed. And I was like, everything's going to be okay. Like, I don't know how, and I don't know how hard this road's going to be to get there, but like, God's got this. And both of those two girls are going to be completely okay. And it was just like, in moments of fear when the flesh did take over, just returning to lyrics that someone penned in a room at another church, another state, but like that were speaking so heavily to us, and really became like the cornerstone of what we believed and what we knew in our hearts to be true.
Yeah, and we would drive around Colorado because we were there for basically a week, like a work week, and only had 2 days that we were at the hospital. So the other days we just drove around trying to fill our time, and we would have this music on in the car. And there were a lot of times we wouldn't even be talking to each other. We would just be like letting that worship music just play and like set over our spirits. And I don't know, I feel like we just prayed through every appointment. The night before the first day of appointments,
had people praying for you, a lot of people praying for you.
I mean, because we had shared about it publicly, so many people were praying over those things. And our parents FaceTimed us the night before we went to the hospital, and we all like had a group just prayer in our hotel room when they FaceTimed us. And I mean, it was the only way to get through all those things. The whole journey was to be able to just pray and worship and focus on what the peace that he was giving us, even though the situation didn't seem like it was gonna be the easiest thing or, whatever. But we knew that he was just going to give us peace to walk through it. And again, because we had seen him at so many points through the journey, even up to that point, and then through the Colorado trip and after, we just had this sense that everything was going to be okay, even though we had no idea how that was going to happen or what it was going to look like. We just knew it was going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That's such an amazing story. And I just really appreciate you guys sharing it here and just talking through all that stuff. It's so important, I think, for people to hear. And I would just love you guys. And I'm so glad that you came and shared this story with us today. And so thank you so much for joining us on Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify and follow us on social media. Find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.